Before we move on to the next step with the paper clay, I want to talk to you a little bit about the water. With the water that we use, since we put peroxide in it, we can recycle the water. So when I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching students, they are constantly reusing the water. So all of the water that is squeezed out can be put back into the bucket of water that we get the water from for the blender. So the water is constantly being recycled. When the water gets low, we just add more, so you're not wasting any water with this process. So just a little tip to make everything a little more environmentally friendly. Okay, the next step in making paper clay. Now that we have our paper all shredded up into pea-sized pieces, and you can see it fills maybe 1/5 of the bag. Okay, and you can see it's kind of fluffy. So it's time to add actual moist clay. Now, the kind of moist clay that you use is totally up to you. This is Amico Versa clay, and it is a gray low fire clay. You could use White Art 25, you could use a red terracotta clay, you could use any brand of moist clay, even stoneware would work. And the color will affect your paper clay, but if you're going to paint your paper clay, then it won't matter. But if you do want like a dark gray type of paper clay, you want to find a gray moist clay to break up into your paper. The white clays will make your paper clay a lot lighter in color. So with the Versa clay, I'm going to break a piece off about the size of a racquetball. So that's a racquetball. That's a little big. And you want to ball the clay up so that you can kind of get an idea that you've got the right size piece. So that's pretty close. Now this is where two people come in handy. They can split this ball of clay and two people can break this up. You want to break this up into pea-sized pieces. And the reason you're breaking it up so small is because you want to make sure that the moist clay and the paper bind together. So you're going to be mixing this up, and if the clay is in really big pieces, it's not going to bind with the paper the way you need it to. So the reason I put clay in this paper mixture, because number one, it's a paper clay, and number two, what the clay does, it makes the paper a lot more plastic, so it's much more sculptable. So when you go to sculpt faces and form different textures and stuff, the clay really enables you to get pretty nice detail with the sculpting process. So put on some groovy tunes again and break up your clay. And we'll be right back. Now, we've broken up all that clay into the paper. And you want to toss this around and mix this up. So you want to get the paper and the clay kind of evenly distributed. And then you can seal this, and I usually don't seal it all the way. I'll seal it about 3/4 so the air can leave as I need, otherwise the air will build up and you will pop the bag. So you're going to start to knead. So you're trying to squish the clay and the paper together. So it's not like kneading bread exactly, because you're kind of pushing and squishing. It's a halfway decent, forearm workout. And if you have a partner, you can take turns. And you want to do this until the clay and the paper start to stick together. And I tell students to do this for like 5 minutes because they go, and it takes them forever. But if you're really serious about this, you can get this done in a matter of like a minute. So just know that if you're very slow and gentle with this, that it'll take you longer than it takes me. So you can see it's starting to stick together. And that's what you want. So I'm going to break this back apart a little bit. I'm not going for the small pea-sized pieces that I had in the beginning. These are bigger chunks, so you can see. And it feels very clay-like. You can see the clay on my hand. Okay. The next step is to add the water and then the glue. So the water I have here in this container is from the bucket of recycled water that we've been using. And so I'm going to scoop this little condiment cup full of water and dump it in here. And then I'm going to take another half a scoop. So a scoop and a half of that little cup ends up being about 1/3 of a cup of water. I don't want to add the other half of a scoop into it yet. I want to mix this up and see what I get first. You don't want to get your paper clay too wet. You can always add water to it. You just can't really take water out of it. It's a little more difficult. And I will show you some troubleshooting tips in another video on how to remedy your paper clay if it does get too moist. Okay, so that's pretty good for right now. So I'm going to add the glue. Let's talk a little bit about glue. I have here some Elmer's glue all and some Titebond 2 wood glue. So in the classroom with students, I use Elmer's glue all. It's less expensive and it does the job just fine. The pieces that they make in the classroom are for indoor display, so they're not going to be exposed to the elements. I use the Titebond 2 wood glue for my pieces because some of my work is outdoors, and the Titebond 2 glue makes the paper clay a lot more conducive to being out in the weather. So outdoor use, indoor use. This is also good for indoor use. It just makes the paper clay stronger when it dries. Okay, so we're going to use the Titebond 2 today. So the Titebond 2 glue, you're going to use about 2/3 of a cup. And with these little condiment cups, that's going to equal like 3 of these. So I'm going to let this drain out. I'm going to take a little plastic spoon and kind of scrape it into the bag. Put a little more in. I'm going to start with 2 of these cups because that way you can control the amount of the last little bit of glue that you put in. If you add too much glue, then you have to do some things to remedy the too much glue in your paper clay problem. So if you don't add enough, it's really easy to add more glue. So I've got that mixed in. Anyway, so we are kneading paper clay. So we got the glue in here, we have the water, we have the paper, and we are kneading. And yeah, you're gonna knead this kind of like bread dough. You're pushing and you're squishing. If you have a partner, you guys can take turns. So you just keep kneading. You want to knead until you get this to where it feels like actual clay. This is starting to feel pretty good. And even though you think it feels good, don't stop kneading. Keep going for at least 5 to 10 minutes total. If it feels too dry after that 5 minutes, you can add the other little half of a cup of water. If it doesn't feel tacky enough, you can add another little condiment cup full of glue. So I'm going to knead this and we'll come back in just a few minutes. Now that I've been working this bag of paper clay for about 7 to 10 minutes, it's time to check the consistency. So I'm going to open it up and take a little pinch. And I can tell it feels a little dry and not quite gluey enough. So this is where I'm going to add the extra bit of water. Half of a container, and I'm going to put another container full of glue. So that's going to bring the water amount up to about 1/3 of a cup and the glue to 2/3. I'm going to dump that in there, take my little spoon that's stuck to the lid and scoop it in. Now I like to reuse everything, so this spoon will get washed. And this little glue container will also get washed out so that I can reuse them. I don't like to waste. So I don't throw things away until I've used them up to the point where they're no longer handy. Okay, so I'm going to seal this back again. And I'm leaving just a little gap open because I don't want to have to burp this bag and I don't want to pop it. One of the things that can happen as you're kneading is if there's air trapped, then your bag will pop. And then you have to transfer all of your paper clay to a different bag. And if your glue's not mixed in really well, that can be a super duper mess. So I'll continue to knead this for another 4 or 5 minutes. But for now, I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to show you some paper clay that I made this morning. And so you can check out the consistency. So what you want is paper clay that kind of feels like clay. You can see the paper fibers. Okay, it should be a little sticky on your hands, but it shouldn't stick to your hands, so it shouldn't be that gluey. You should be able to pat this out into a thin pancake, and it should hold together. You can see how thin that is. And you should be able to pretty easily peel it off your hand. Okay, once it's like this, then it's ready to use. Okay, that is paper clay making for today. Join me next time as we go down the creative rabbit hole.